Welcome to the Gerard Delage Cup, an international competition to choose the best young waiter in the world. This is the Olympics of service. The contestants have spent several years in hotel and restaurant school, practicing their flambés, fork work, and other flourishes.
Voilà, monsieur, le steak au porc. Très beau. Très beau. Voilà, monsieur.
Finalists come from a dozen countries, where they've survived equally brutal semifinals. The 100-centimeter smoked salmon slice, the freestyle fish fillet, and the always tense Spanish orange peel race. They are being studied for everything from their knowledge in wine to the knot in their tie. The judges are some of Europe and Canada's top restaurateurs, a tough bunch who aren't easily impressed.
Manque un peu de jus. Manque de jus. Le doigt sur la lame. Moi, je n'aime pas. La première tranche était bien coupée, et ensuite c'est creusé par la mauvaise tranche.
Judging is a difficult task because they're trying to measure a human art by scientific means. A good server needs technique, but also the experience and confidence that puts a customer at ease. If they have it, service can transform an ordinary meal into a feast, not a disaster. And inexperience will be sensed by a diner as much as by a judge. However, in the real world of restaurants, a mistake may cost you your tip or even your job, not just your pride.
Et la décoration, normalement, c'est la cerise? Jamais. Jamais cerise. Vous n'oubliez pas. Jamais dans votre vie. D'accord? Toujours citron.
You know, service is like a sport. It's like a performance. And I feel so sorry for them because they're just shaking the front. They know all sorts of stuff, but they're terrified. And what they haven't had is 30 years of working in a restaurant, you know?
We all get service every day, but few of us pay much attention to it unless it's very good or very bad, whether we're in a bistro in Paris or a clothing store in Toronto.
Made in Italy, the fabrication.
A good server is invisible and makes you feel you've made just the right choice, even when they've made it for you.
Very clean. How does that feel?
Feels great.
We have barbecue sauce, honey barbecue sauce, honey mustard sauce, and they're all on the top.
How you're served says a lot about the time and place you live in.
Have a good day.
In France, it's very formal. And in America, it can be very informal.
Whoever has a high IQ and read my policy, then they get the best treatment, like a king and queen.
Service can range from utterly indifferent to overly attentive.
Simplement vous dire bonne journée. Bonne journée.
Where did they go?
Sometimes it seems sincere when it's not.
Let's just say you can smile at everyone, but you don't mean it, you know? I mean, I'm smiling at you right now.
It's a porthole into the future and a glimpse into the past. But whatever form it takes, service is part of our daily lives. A social intersection point where the powerful meet the powerless in a changing ritual that's rarely studied.
The relationship between the customer and the service employee is like one of those mating dances that you see on National Geographic. You know, it's like I'm moving around and you're moving around and we're trying to get together to realize whether or not this is the time for us to make a deal.
So let's take a tour through the world of service and see what it says about who we are. The word service comes from the Latin servicium, which means slavery, and traces of this past can be seen in some professions.
It's a pleasure, sir. No problem, sir.
No problem, sir.
Your champagne, my lady.
The epitome of perfect service is the British butler, a profession that goes back some 500 years. Back then, the only way to get good service was to own your own servant.
Now, the reason we are carrying glasses on our heads is we want you to look upright and smart. You will look the typical English-trained butler.
Here at Ivor Spencer's Butler School in London, they'll still turn out a loyal servant who puts his master's life before his own.
When they arrive at the school, the first thing I say to them is, after good morning, is I want you to know that to be a butler and trained by us, that your employers come before your mother, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. They come first. Now, nobody ever says that to any employee.
With only one customer to please, a personal butler strives for perfection in even the subtlest details.
The ink from the paper comes out in the employer's hands, and if he's eating toast, it's toxic. Gets onto his fingers, gets onto the toast, and it's perfection, and that's what we're looking for. We iron the front and the back, and for Madam, if there's a fashion page, we would iron that too.
Oh, wish me luck.
Happy landing.
Many British consider the butler a holdover from the old days of servant and master. But Spencer feels a butler is no more servile than a clerk in a store.
A lot of people would say the girl serving the butler salmon in a supermarket is not servile. But the butler serving that salmon on a silver dish to an employer is servile. Well, it's crazy. It's the same salmon. We're very proud to do what we're doing. It's the second oldest profession in the world.
These days, it's also a dying profession, most popular with US pop stars. Few people in England are willing to show the dedication required to become an old-style servant.
If this was an assessment on the final day, I would say it was absolutely pathetic. It's not what I would expect.
In fact, England is a country where most service is anything but perfect, because most servers don't want to be servants anymore.
Hello. Can you tell me where the scourers are, please? No. I have no idea.
Just the one up there. All the ones that we have are along that side there.
Today, British servers are rebelling against their past.
They resent serving you, particularly in Harrods. I mean, Harrods is appalling. You could wait till you die, you would never get anyone to serve you.
They're not friendly at all. They're arrogant and just don't care whether they serve you or not. They just want to get home, and that's it.
It's just their attitude towards you as well. Like, some of them, you feel like they don't want to work.
Behind the uncivil service is lingering resentment at Britain's old class system, which divided server from served. This is Oxford, England, where there's an Oxford Fellow of everything, including the world's only Fellow of Customer Service. She says British service is still marked by class.
In the States, as a much younger country, a much younger nation, wherever you start, you can get right to the top. You can start as a waiter and get to own a chain of restaurants. In this country, you are born into a position, and that position is seen as being likely to be yours for life. You stay. You are labelled by that, and you tend to stay there. You don't want to be stuck in this unequal, put-down sort of position. So there's not going to be much happiness about it. There isn't a pleasure and a friendliness the way in the way in which we treat customers.
Lovely, thank you.
Customer service is a new field in England. One of the first to work in it was Nigel Barlow. He says most servers here quickly let you know who's the boss.
If you take something in to get fixed or repaired, their first impression is to give you the body language that this is going to be really difficult, really awkward. To find the parts, we'd have to go to Afghanistan probably. It's going to be really difficult, sir. But they usually do it.
You have that one at £150 if you want it.
It's like a little ritual dance where people have to say, you know, I'm going to give you what you want if you also acknowledge that I am on a level with you, I'm equal with you.
It's been said that England became a nation of shopkeepers so that they could all put up signs saying closed. Even in supermarkets, standard North American services like baggers are still seen as a favor.
Where they do have them, they've heralded this as a great breakthrough, revolution in customer service. You know, I've spent hours actually packing my own bags, struggling against the girl behind the till to fill them before she moves on to the next customer. So I feel I've worked for the supermarket many months in my life here.
Adding to the problem is the reserved body language of the British.
If you go into a hotel or a restaurant, you're unlikely to get eye contact like you would in America. I said when you meet someone in England, you better have a clean pair of shoes, not a clean face, because people kind of tend to do that and not look at people in the eyes.
There's likely to be a more physical distance between the server and the served because there's inequality in England than there is in the States, where distances between people are smaller. Americans tend to come closer. That gives a friendly relationship. When you're talking about the British, we've got inequality and the British habit of standing further apart. So you don't build up that sort of friendly relationship.
Customers are long used to being innocent casualties in the undeclared war between server and served. There are queues everywhere, but most people take it with a stiff upper lip.
There was a queue of people waiting and all the people behind the counter, they were just having a conversation about cars or something. I just waited. We were quite patient, really, because we just stood and waited. But I was angry.
I'd probably wait. I'd just be angry.
We just wait. We don't kick up a fuss, you see. That's the trouble.
Why not?
Yeah, we should.
I know. I don't think perhaps a little bit of the British Reserve that's inbuilt.
I think it's a residue of a class system which is no longer there, where we used to have clearly differentiated relationships between master and servant. And now what we have is like an in-between world, where we see models of service from other parts of the world. Now people travel, and yet at the same time, our old models of master-slave, boss-servant have finished. And we don't know where we are. We don't really know what the rules of this game are.
Don't look at the ground when you're saying, "Good morning, Lord Jones." Don't look at his belly button. Look at his eyes. Eye contact is very, very important.
Spencer was recently hired to teach customer service to hotel and restaurant staff, passing on the pride he has in his own profession. But it's an uphill battle.
Bow first and then speak. Good morning. 95% of British waiters or waitresses, they feel it's servile, demeaning. They don't even tell their friends that they're a waiter or waitresses. And it's a great pity that this happens, because if you're skilled at something, you should be proud of doing it. But that's been the trend. The British do not like to serve others, except for the British trained butler.
The origins of great professional service are found in Paris, home of the world's first restaurants, though it took a literal revolution to invent them. A French Revolution. This is royal service fit for a king, because it began with King Louis XIV. His meals were so lavish that audiences of nobles came to see him eat, then imitated the attention paid to every detail and every guest.
Mais je vous dis bon anniversaire à tous les deux.
Merci, merci.
Et je vous embrasse. Voilà, je vous embrasse.
Royal service didn't become available to the public until Louis XVI lost his head in the Revolution, leaving hundreds of servants unemployed.
Ce qui a changé avec la Révolution, c'est que les cuisiniers et les valets de pied qui étaient chargés du service n'ont plus de patron, ont perdu leur patron. Alors, parce qu'ils sont partis en Angleterre, parce que beaucoup ont été assassinés, etc. Et ce qu'ils font, c'est qu'ils vont monter des restaurants.
Allô, chef, les garnitures, s'il vous plaît.
These first restaurants were exotic places, offering a menu with individual choices instead of the same thing everyone else was eating. Now, anyone could eat like a king or queen, if they could afford it. And the rest of the world could only read about it.
The first instance of the word restaurant is by an American writer. It was James Fenimore Cooper, who was in Paris. It was about 1827. And he wrote back and said, "You won't believe what they have here. They have this thing they call a restaurant where you go in and you order a meal, whatever you want to eat, and you pay for just that. This is a terrific idea. We should adopt it in America.
As the first restaurants spread through Paris, they needed a new type of server to educate their new clientele, who had never used more than one fork. The servers had to teach the customer how to dine like kings in restaurants like this, whose royal service has become world-renowned.
À la Révolution, les gens qui ont pris le pouvoir, c'était des gueux, c'est des gens qui n'avaient pas de raffinement. Ils ne savaient pas associer les vins et les mets, ils ne savaient pas dans quel ordre faire un menu.
Maybe you need some help?
Donc, il faut absolument qu'il y ait des gens qui les conseillent pour savoir comment manger. Il y a un rôle éducatif de la part du restaurant, et en particulier du maître d'hôtel, et du sommelier, et du chef de rang, etc.
Il ne faut pas lutter au point de vue richesse de l'agneau.
Because of the French Revolution, the server went from personal servant to professional server.
C'était un très bon choix, c'est très bien fait.
And in restaurants like La Tour d'Argent, they still provide service almost as attentive as in the days of Louis XIV.
We have 80 people working in the Tour d'Argent, which is crazy, but I'm crazy, and I love crazy people, which is out of proportion, which is a moment of exception, a dream. So the staff here rehearse in the afternoon how to speak, where to stand, but not too close, otherwise it would be indiscreet. It's all those little details that is not explained in a book, but people feel when they come here. That's what I call great service.
French service is a complex relationship, partly because the server knows more about the meal than the served. Unlike the British butler, he's always had a dash of rebellion. He's a servant, but a servant with attitude. And all of this adds a certain formality and distance to the French dining experience.
When I go to United States from time to time, I'm always amazed to see how people are familiar with customers. We are not in France. It should be warm, but a customer is a customer, and a waiter is a waiter. And that's a tradition.
Tradition is the only rule in most French restaurants, even the lowly bistro. The bistro was born in the early 1800s, the place where French factory workers could eat a fast, cheap lunch. The word came from Russian soldiers visiting France after Napoleon's defeat. They shouted "Bistro, bistro" at the waiters, a Russian word that means quickly. Bistro waiters are as fast as French service gets, though they never sacrifice style for speed. Here, waiting is a proud profession, usually done by men. They've spent years learning the right way to serve food, and they observe it down to the last detail. They're not here to please the customer, they're just doing their job, as it's always been done.
Faut commencer par commis, il faut commencer par en bas pour arriver en haut. Il faut du temps pour faire ce boulot-là. Il faut du temps. C'est un métier qu'il faut aller.
How much experience do you need if you're thinking of applying for a job?
Voilà, ça fait 36 ans. J'y vais sur ma 23e année. 20 ans. 20 ans.
In France, the waiter is a skilled professional, part host, part tag team, and part juggler. And to watch them in action is to see the aristocracy of service in the Western world. A restaurant ballet that almost looks choreographed, even though the client is no longer the king.
Il n'y a plus de roi comme dans le temps. Non, non, c'est un égal. On l'accueille avec plaisir. Client roi, c'est fini ce temps-là, c'est fini. Non. Là, il y a toujours ce qu'il faut, c'est le respect.
Excuse me, madam, but would you like fries or maybe a salad with that? Working at the restaurant. Working at the restaurant. Give people what they want. Working at the restaurant. I'll get it later. waiter, working at the restaurant.
North American service has two trademarks. It's fast and it's informal, with little line between the server and the served. There's a mix of clientele that goes back to pioneer days, when people ate together, whatever their social class.
Travelers would all be sitting in one communal dining room at one long table. It didn't much matter who you were. You know, people like Charles Dickens came over and the French came over. This is where they found themselves. They'd have a stagecoach stop and they'd be sitting next to backwoodsmen and people of every stripe, and that's the way it was.
Unlike France, being a waiter in North America is usually just a job. It's rarely a profession you choose for life, although it often becomes one anyway.
I took it as a temporary job. My husband passed away and I had 2 children to raise, and I went and worked in restaurants temporarily. 25 years later, I'm still here.
As a nation of immigrants opened their own restaurants, they often added their own distinctive touch.
In the ethnic restaurants, in the delis, whose owners weren't very comfortable with Americans, whose owners made a certain kind of food they didn't want to change. These types of waiters, whoever walks through that door is going to treat them exactly the same way, gruff and rough, and without the kind of deference that you would find in other places.
This man is known as the Soup Nazi. He's a New York legend, so famous for gruff service that Seinfeld did a whole episode about him. People of all kinds line up for half an hour at lunch, partly for the soup, but also for the hope they'll be insulted. The owner has a long set of rules, which everyone obeys, even movie stars and politicians. And Lord help you if you don't know all the rules.
What's in the shrimp feast?
Can I help you? Take 15 minutes to explain what you would have in here. Large shrimp, right?
I'm sorry?
Large shrimp, right. If you're waking up here, I have no 15 minutes time to explain what you have in here.
Okay. So, I've just ordered. Okay.
You have to keep your mouth shut. Let me finish with him. And concentrate make the order first. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
And don't count on support from your fellow clients. They all play by the house rules.
I'll have a shrimp.
Let me first.
Large shrimp bisque and small chili.
What did I do wrong here? You read the sign. It says, pass the shrimp glass, please have the money ready. You give the man your order, you tell him what you want, you give him the money, he gives you change, and then you move to the left.
Service. I can get a little service. I don't want much. Don't want to ruin your day.
America has a better class of service for those who can afford it, like Lord Desmond Athol, who writes books about service for the rich. He flits from England to America, shopping at only the poshest stores like Barney's of New York.
Yeah, if I make an appointment with you next week, are you available if we do a big shop? We could look around for Giorgio Armani suits and some cashmere sweaters and Samory Hampton things.
They have a wonderful personal shopping service, so if you don't want to be bothered with going from department to department, there's a gentleman called Noel up in personal shopping, and he will take care of all your needs. Shop with you, have it delivered to your hotel if you're staying in a hotel or your apartment. So he's absolutely incredible. And that's the kind of service that one looks for in a really tip-top store.
This tip-top service is just a remnant of another era in America, the era of the great department stores, and a motto that's still legendary: the customer is always right.
It's a buyer's market, and if you pay cash, you can always get it on time.
By the early 1900s, a small new middle class had money to spend on luxuries, and they wanted to feel as important as European aristocrats when they spent it. It was the dawn of department stores, and they were opulent palaces of consumption. They had everything from child care nurseries to a full-time nurse and hospital, says a historian who chronicled them.
Holland, don't you get lost
lost again.
You could attend a concert, you could attend an art exhibit, you could buy tickets for a cruise, you could send a telegram, on and on and on.
I think I'll just take a plain one. But this is the very latest. We've only had them in a few days.
Department stores eliminated the counter that divided the customer from the merchandise.
Do we have any more of this material? Yes, we do.
This created a new pastime called browsing.
Oh, isn't this applique beautiful?
Just arrived from Paris, madam.
It's charming.
What are you looking for, Mother?
Oh, I'm just shopping.
As shopping became a pastime, serving became important. Store managers realized that bad service was good for show business, but not for their business.
You can make the customer feel important, and believe me, the customer is important to us. The same.
They began to train staff in a new science called customer service.
$5 and 5 is 10. Here's your receipt. Thank you very much.
We met her for only a few seconds, but that was time enough for her to impress us with her friendliness and accuracy. Now, notice how she gives the closing a personal touch.
Here's your receipt. Thank you, Mrs. Wright. And I do hope Mr. Wright will be well soon. Thank you.
Shop girls were supposed to be friendly, but not too friendly.
The great no-no was to be referred to as dear or dearie by a saleswoman. Absolutely forbidden, because that was, of course, a sign of a kind of equality, of a kind of intimacy that the customer did not want.
Will you show this lady some cardigans, please? Certainly.
Professional service jobs gradually spread from department stores to many other businesses.
Notice your windshield wiper's kind of loose.
For a while, servers knew many of their customers personally, because few people could afford service. But this changed dramatically in the 1940s, when the elite customer of the past was replaced with the new mass consumer.
Everyone wants one of these, or nearly everyone. Why, you've got to have a car.
World War II assembly lines were turning to mass production for a growing middle class eager to buy anything.
Yes, cars, radios, vacuum cleaners, nylons, juicy steaks. It sounds almost like a dream.
Car culture was spreading across America, and service was changing with it. Restaurants were catering to ordinary people who wanted fast, not fancy service. Drive-ins got rid of the tables and the chairs, and the race was already on to get rid of the waitress.
Shopping by electricity is a new idea from America, where they try to make everything easy and don't always succeed. The bulb affair is called a key, which the shopper plugs into an aperture to release the groceries she wants.
Wait until it flashes, you'll note that. Now that's a purchase of one article.
The Key Doozle grocery chain was heralded as the store of the future. It was supposed to replace grocery clerks with machines that only needed people to refill them. A chain opened in several cities, but by 1950 it had failed, and the future of automated service seemed to lay elsewhere. The mass production of cheap goods had created millions of new consumers, but it was the lowly, mass-produced hamburger that launched a revolution in how consumers were served. Leading the charge were two brothers with an idea they called speedy service. They sold a few prepackaged items, then got rid of the dishes and the waitress who carried them. It was the birth of self-service.
When the McDonald's brothers first opened their first McDonald's, people waited in their cars for somebody to come out. They wouldn't get out and buy the stuff because nobody had known this before. It's hard to imagine, but what they were doing is completely eliminating all kinds of service. Not a class of service, not a type of service. All service was eliminated. There was just a teenager in a funny hat behind a cash register who took your order and threw the stuff on, and you had to move along.
May I help you, sir?
Restaurants were soon singing the praises of old-style service while doing away with it.
One Whopper with no pickle and no lettuce.
Hold the pickle, hold the lettuce. Special orders don't upset us. All we ask is that you let us serve it your way.
Supermarkets pushed the trend further, as the invention of easy-to-use shopping carts allowed people to serve themselves as much as they wanted. Today we all shop this way, but back then, the carts were so unusual, stores hired actors to use them before customers would try them out. Self-service was sold as a new freedom.
The romance, the adventure of choosing from foods gathered from the four corners of America, and indeed from all the world.
Not to mention the adventure of lugging your own groceries out to the car. From there, the self-serve revolution never looked back, as discount stores cut prices by cutting service. North America was becoming a service economy, but you couldn't tell, as people served themselves everything from underwear to houseware. By the 1970s, the new motto of the department store was, "It's not my department." Veteran sales staff had vanished, replaced by a few young people who were responsible for inventory, not customers. Service was a forgotten art. Training was abandoned, and neither side of the counter seemed interested in the other. Shopping had become an anonymous experience, with growing hostility toward anyone still left to help.
In the pre-World War II period, when service was so widely pushed in department stores, the kind of complaint that a customer would have would be about the quality of service, that a salesperson wasn't deferential enough. In some ways, something had gone wrong with the transaction. The complaint after World War II is that the transaction never took place because there aren't enough salespeople around. The complaint is, can you ever find a salesperson?
The symbol of the problem was the airlines, but automated banks, phones, and other services were hot on their heels with new ways of dehumanizing service.
Thank you for calling Air Canada. For arrival and departure information, press 1. For executive or executive first.
We had gone from self-service to no service.
To end this call at any time, press 9.
Suddenly, at the end of the 80s, people just said enough already. The service is really second rate. It was second rate on the airlines, second rate in the auto industry, it was second rate in retailing. Fundamentally, the customer was ticked off and upset.
What is service excellence, aside from that triangle?
An industry of consultants appeared overnight, teaching new techniques that seemed oddly familiar.
What's the first thing to do? Greet the customer.
1. Greet the customer as graciously as you greet guests in your own home.
As if he or she is a friend who walked into
Your home.
your home.
In a sense, you are the hostess for the company.
A new era of service was beginning.
Hello, how are you? My name is Kara. I'll be your server today. I can get a little service. I don't want much. Don't want to ruin your day.
Welcome to the friendly 90s.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
Not bad, thanks.
What a beautiful day, eh?
Beautiful.
This is Walmart's, where a full-time greeter tries to be friendly to 2,000 customers a day.
Good morning. Good morning.
Service is today's buzzword, and there are new rules for staff to make customers feel they're in a small-town store, even though they're in the fourth biggest store in America.
We have things like what's called the 3-meter rule, which means if a Walmart associate sees a customer within 3 meters, they should greet them and ask them if they can help.
Good morning. very good, thank you.
Need any help?
Morning, how are you?
Morning, not too bad, thank you.
Despite the rules, there isn't that much service. The real challenge is to get yourself within 3 meters of an employee. Not easy in a store the size of a football field. Still, many of Walmart's competitors have adopted their own formulas for paying lip service to real service.
Guest assistance to furniture.
I got that. I'll be right over.
Guest assistance to houseware.
Target stores wire up their roving staff like the Secret Service.
These come in larger sizes.
They speak an Orwellian new language. Customers are now called guests, while employees are team members.
We all want to remember that we want to put on our happy faces. I want to start the huddle off today with some group exercises. So we'll be at our very best to serve the guests.
What North Americans often do is tell the staff to be nice to everyone. So what's happening is that the individual being of the server, their personality, is now become commodified. It's what makes the difference between my shop and the next one.
Just do a little neck roll.
Frankly, it's still hard to tell the difference between stores because they all use the same techniques to look different. But does mass service have to be uniform service? Or can a big store have some personality? For the ultimate in friendly 90s service, there's no place on earth like Stu Leonard's, where the old department store motto is etched in stone. Leonard's is a tiny dairy in Norwalk, Connecticut that's grown to become a service legend. 100,000 shoppers now flock here each week, almost entirely because of old-fashioned friendly service. It's not hard to find happy customers.
For some reason the cash register broke down. Somebody came along, put all my items back into the cart without me having to yell and scream, and brought me to another cash register and then brought me a bunch of flowers. Made my day.
That's for you.
The owner and maitre d' is Stu Leonard Jr. He seems to know every one of his 1,300 employees and most of his 13 million customers.
Hey, Zita, I'm with a customer now. Let her ask you a question.
When are you going back to the donuts that were good? The ones you have now are lousy.
Why?
They're hard.
And they come in daily.
They don't sell.
But she said they taste hard and they don't taste fresh.
And you don't have plain donuts anymore.
We'll get a few more samples and check into it.
We look at every customer you see around the store right here. They spend $100 every single week. Over a year, that's $5,000. Over a 10-year period, that's $50,000. Each person here, we pretend like they have a big thing on their forehead, $50,000. That's why it's important to keep them happy.
In a society where shoppers flutter from store to store like butterflies, Leonard has turned his grocery into a kind of small-town community. The store's spirit has made Leonard's an international lord of customer service. 10,000 businessmen a year make pilgrimages here just to study the service. Leonard says the family atmosphere comes from treating his staff like professionals. Many have been here as long as a French waiter and seem just as proud.
We all work together, and we've become a family. My husband divorced me, and I had no place to go, and I came here, and I found a family.
They're great.
You like it?
So good.
Would you like some? You know, I'm here 18 years. A lot of these items you see around here came from family recipes. Italian lasagna was actually my grandmother's recipe. Have a good day. It's actually like this is my business. I treat this like it was mine.
We have our own motto here at Stu Leonard's, our own code of ethics, and that is every day is showtime. Every day is showtime.
Customers, as they're walking through our doors.
This is Roy, the store manager.
we don't fight, 'cause the customers are always right.
This new style of service may seem corny, but it's very seductive. In fact, American-style friendliness is spreading globally, and it's hard to say if it's improving service or standardizing it. On the most hallowed corners of the globe, U.S. chains are spreading the American way of being served. In Paris, an average of 19 French restaurants a day are closing. Many are replaced by le fast food for a young generation that has never known real French service. Back in Oxford, England, the local bars have some friendly competition.
Hi, good evening. My name's Mandy. I'll be your waitress this evening. Can I get some drinks?
Hi there, my name's Andy. I'll be a bartender for tonight.
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm the waitress for today. Can I get you a drink?
As the British rebel against their own service, American-style service is moving into the vacuum.
What am I doing when I'm doing things?
Being animated.
I'm being animated. I'm using my hands a lot, and I'm also making sure that I'm looking at every single one of you.
Got a club sandwich?
The managers train the staff to act American, and the staff train the customers.
You'll go up to me and say, hi, you know, can I get you a drink? Do you want me to have a look through the menu with you, help you choose what you want? And they'll be eyes down, won't look at you, no, I'll just have that. And it, you know, it takes a while to get them to, you know, it's actually all right to talk to someone who's serving you.
You can actually teach people while you're serving them that it isn't about class, it's just about having a good time and giving people what they want.
It's more friendly here, but I feel that it's false. I don't feel it's a natural, genuine thing.
I just think it's a shame that people can't be polite and serve you well without having to be trained to do it. I think it's just something people should do naturally and honestly, and they don't.
Even some of the harshest critics of British service aren't sure they prefer the alternative.
When I've been in the States for a couple of weeks, and I've had a lot of have a nice day, how are you, how may I help you, sir? I want to get back to a good bit of British insult and a little bit of humour and banter, which may not be so helpful, but it's like we understand the rules of the game here. It's culturally appropriate.
Canadians are also caught between their European roots and their American neighbour. Experts say they're struggling to find their own model of service.
I think we prefer a little gentler type of service, maybe a little less, hi, how are you, have a good day in your face as you go through the store type of service. Not everybody likes that.
Some of it is cultural. Our European, French, and British background is that you need to get to know me before I give you permission to get that close to me and come into my space. And some of it is we are such skeptics and cynics that, you know, what is the ulterior motive? Why are you being so friendly? Pops into the consumer's mind a great deal.
And what of service in the future? Will technology and uniformity squeeze the server out of service? Or can humans hold their own? This is Nike Town, a New York shoe store with the state-of-the-art in service technology. There's no one kneeling like a servant to measure your size. There's just a machine that tells you everything you ever wanted to know about your foot. And then a good deal more. If you can figure out what it all means. The customers are still so bewildered that staff keep busy explaining how the machine works and running the giant air vacuum tube that brings up shoes from the stockroom. They say the new technology gives them time to talk to customers. But who'll be fired first in a recession? This machine or this human? And Nike Town is just a glimpse into the future.
I am the glory of my time.
As we approach the millennium, no one is sure where humans will fit into the fast-changing technology of service. And everyone is experimenting to find out. At Levi's Jeans, a person measures you, then the jean machine takes over, beaming your measurement by satellite to the factory. Presto! Made to measure pants just for you, without a tailor. The internet may allow other old-fashioned services to be done yourself. Is this the grocery store of the future, or just a new version of an old dream?
Insert the key there. There's one. Now remove it immediately.
It's not just technology that's changing, it's our values. In an individualistic world, we all want to be served quickly, yet we all want to feel unique. In Toronto, Le Marché restaurant mixes French-style gourmet dining with American self-service for today's consumer who wants a say in everything.
Can you not get cheese in it?
Can you get that cheese?
Yeah, I'd like just...
Without the feta cheese?
Yeah.
Sure, just give me 5 minutes. I'll cook a special order.
I'd like one with that. I'm not sure what it is.
200 years ago, the French menu was a revolution in choice. But today, you design your own menu, and the chef is right there at your service.
Just a little bit, un petit peu, mademoiselle. That's my little, you should see my lot.
It is truly, you decide. It's your decision what you'd like, but it's your decision on how many mussels, if you want those mussels, if you'd like that steak, you know, that particular steak you can have if you want it. And that's where you're interactive and actually creating the dish, and the dish is made for you.
Ultimately, the service of tomorrow may turn out to be a blend of future and past. Self-service for the ordinary, and human service when you need something extraordinary.
Okay, so something a little bit more, shall we say sexy? Sexy, let's say sexy. Okay.
A return to old-style friendliness without making it homogeneous.
They've been trying to standardize human behavior since the early 20th century, and it hasn't worked because, in fact, you're dealing with something that's infinitely variable with human beings, and it's impossible to standardize that. It's impossible to completely reduce that to a formula because people simply aren't going to act out their formulas.
Back at the Best Waiter contest, the students are following their instructors' formulas, learning the right way to serve. But if they want to become great waiters, they may eventually have to forget the rules. Because great service is an art, not a science. And it can't be done mechanically by people or machines. It takes a human touch. Fausto is one of New York's most loved waiters because he's always wanted to be something else. So every night at the small Mazai restaurant, he briefly abandons his job, and everyone takes part in Fausto's dream. And throughout the service world, whether they are serving ordinary customers, aristocrats, or would-be kings, an army of servers tries to keep up with society's changing needs, while adding their own personal touch. And when they succeed, we are all better served.
Customers,
as they're walking through our doors. We just wanna give